for 26 years. He believed the lie until the truth destroyed everything. The father raised him in misery while hiding the billionaire grandmother who was searching for him. The envelope fell to the floor as if it had its own weight, too heavy to be just paper. Adrian Volkner picked it up with trembling hands, never imagining that this object, hidden for years inside his own father's coat, carried the truth that would destroy his entire life and rebuild another in its place. When he broke the golden seal, his world stopped. Inside were letters that his billionaire grandmother, Amélie Delacroix, had sent for over a decade. Letters begging to meet her grandson. Letters inviting him to travel to Europe. Letters offering education, a home, a future, protection, all opened, all torn at the edges, all intercepted by his father, the same man who raised him in absolute poverty, saying no one cared about them. But the final blow was at the bottom of the envelope, a video testament recorded before his grandmother's death, accusing her own son of emotionally kidnapping her grandson and declaring Adrian the sole heir to the Delacroix empire. In the hospital, his father tried to deny it, but it was too late. Adrian pressed play on the video in front of the medical staff, and the truth silenced the entire corridor. "You stole an entire life from me," he said calmly, and that sentence destroyed the man who destroyed him first. Before we continue, tell us in the comments what city and country you're watching from. This space is ours, and your stories matter here too. Now yes, let's go to the beginning of this turning point of destiny. For 26 years, Adrian believed that poverty was fate. Son of an unstable, aggressive man obsessed with hiding debts, he grew up moving from city to city, living on favors, temporary jobs, and the constant feeling that something was wrong, something unspoken, something hidden. His father always repeated the same phrase, "It's just the two of us in the world. No one ever wanted you." And that shaped everything. It watered the fears, built the insecurities, created a young man who only knew closed doors. But all of that crumbled on the afternoon his father collapsed on the street and was rushed to the hospital. Amid the chaos, his old coat tore, and the envelope fell. That envelope opened the door someone tried to lock for decades. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was about identity, about abandonment, about the entire life they stole from him. And when Adrian discovered who he really was, he returned to reclaim not just what had value, but what had been denied. Adrian Volkner's earliest memory wasn't of a birthday party or a family vacation. It was of eviction. He was 7 years old, standing on a cracked sidewalk in Gary, Indiana, watching two men in stained work shirts carry their furniture out of a basement apartment and dump it on the curb like garbage. His father, Elias, stood with his arms crossed, jaw clenched, saying nothing. Not to the landlord, not to Adrian. Just silence, thick and suffocating. "Pick up your backpack," Elias finally said. "We're leaving." That became the pattern. A new city every 18 months, sometimes less. Cleveland, Detroit, Buffalo, places where rent was cheap and questions were fewer. Elias worked sporadically, mechanic jobs, warehouse gigs, anything that paid cash under the table. And Adrian learned early not to ask why they never stayed anywhere long enough for him to make real friends. By the time Adrian was 12, he was working too. After school, he'd head to Old Man Garrett's junkyard on the edge of town, sorting scrap metal for $5 an hour. His hands would bleed from the rust and sharp edges, but he never complained. The money helped. And more than that, it gave him somewhere to be that wasn't the cramped studio apartment where his father spent evenings, drinking cheap beer and staring at nothing. "You know why we live like this?" Elias asked one night, his words slurred. Adrian was doing homework at the kitchen table, a wobbly card table they'd found on the street. "Because we don't have money," Adrian said quietly. "Because no one gives a damn about us." Elias leaned back in his chair, eyes red. "Your mother left before you could even walk. Didn't want the burden, my family. They cut me off years ago. It's just us, kid. Just us against the whole damn world." Adrian believed him. Why wouldn't he? It was all he'd ever known. High school was a series of humiliations. Wearing the same 3 shirts in rotation, eating lunch alone because he couldn't afford the cafeteria food, teachers who looked at him with pity that felt worse than contempt. He was smart, smarter than most kids in his classes, but intelligence didn't erase the shame of being poor. Senior year, he applied to community college. He'd saved enough from the junkyard for tuition, but 2 weeks before classes started, Elias came home with a black eye and empty pockets. "We have to move," he said. "Tonight. Dad, I start school in 2 weeks. Forget school." Elias was already throwing clothes into trash bags. "We don't have time. Pack." They left Buffalo at 3 in the morning. Everything they owned stuffed into a rusted Chevy that barely started. Adrian watched the city disappear in the rearview mirror, along with the last thread of hope he'd been holding on to. They ended up in Erie, Pennsylvania, another decaying industrial town, another basement apartment with water stains on the ceiling. Elias found work at a tire shop. Adrian got a job at a gas station, working overnight shifts that left him hollow-eyed and exhausted. 26 years old, and this was his life. No degree, no career, no future beyond the next paycheck. But there were moments, small, strange moments, when Adrian sensed something was off, like the time he found his father burning papers in the kitchen sink at 2 in the morning. "Just old bills," Elias had said, but Adrian saw envelopes with foreign stamps, elegant handwriting, or the way his father would tense whenever Adrian mentioned wanting to travel, to see Europe, to do anything beyond their suffocating routine. "Why would you want to go there?" Elias would snap. "There's nothing for you out there, nothing." But the strangest moment came one afternoon when Adrian was cleaning their apartment. He was moving a stack of his father's old books, dusty paperbacks Elias never read, when something slipped out from between the pages. A photograph, black and white, creased with age. A woman in her 60s, elegant, standing in front of what looked like a European estate. She had sharp cheekbones, piercing eyes, and a slight smile that seemed to know something the camera didn't. Adrian stared at it. He'd never seen this woman before, never heard his father mention her. On the back, in faded ink, Amélie Delacroix, 1998. "What are you doing?" Adrian spun around. Elias stood in the doorway, face white. "I was just—" Adrian held up the photo. "Who is this?" Elias crossed the room in 3 strides and snatched the photograph from Adrian's hand. "No one. Just someone I used to know. She looks important. She's dead." Elias shoved the photo into his pocket. "And she's none of your business." The conversation ended there, but the image stayed burned in Adrian's mind. That woman, that name, Amélie Delacroix. It would be 2 more years before Adrian understood who she really was. 2 more years before he understood that the poverty, the running, the isolation, all of it was a lie. A lie his father told to keep him trapped, a lie that was about to shatter. The call came at 4:30 in the morning. Adrian was asleep on the couch. The apartment was too small for separate bedrooms. When his phone buzzed against the floor, he grabbed it blindly, heart already racing the way it always did when something woke him suddenly. "Is this Adrian Volkner?" "Yeah." "Who?" "This is Mercy Hospital. Your father was brought in an hour ago. You're listed as his emergency contact." Adrian was already pulling on his shoes. "What happened?" "Cardiac event. He collapsed on the street. You should come now." The hospital was a 20-minute drive. Adrian made it in 12. He found his father in the ER, surrounded by machines that beeped and hissed. Elias looked smaller than Adrian had ever seen him, pale, shrunken, tubes running from his arms. His eyes were closed, chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. "Mr. Volkner," a doctor appeared beside him, clipboard in hand. "Your father had a myocardial infarction. We've stabilized him for now, but the next 24 hours are critical." Adrian nodded numbly. He should have felt something, of fear, sadness, anything, but all he felt was a strange, cold emptiness. How much of his life had he spent afraid of this man? Not physically afraid, though there had been moments, but afraid of disappointing him, afraid of being abandoned, afraid of confirming what Elias always said, that they were worthless, that no one cared, that survival was all they'd ever have. "Can I stay with him?" Adrian asked. "Of course." Adrian sat in the plastic chair beside the bed and watched his father breathe. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Outside the window, the sky shifted from black to grey to the pale wash of dawn. And then, around 7, a commotion. "We need to move him," a nurse said, rushing in. "He's showing signs of arrhythmia. We're taking him up to ICU." Everything happened fast. The bed was wheeled out, Adrian following behind, his father's belongings shoved into his arms, wallet, keys, the old brown coat Elias had worn for as long as Adrian could remember. They reached the ICU. "You'll have to wait here," the nurse said. And then the doors swung shut. Adrian stood there, holding his father's coat. It was heavy, heavier than it should have been. He sat down in the waiting area, turning the coat over in his hands. The fabric was worn thin in places, patched clumsily with duct tape. One of the inner seams had torn during the transport, threads hanging loose, and that's when he saw it. A corner of paper, yellowed with age, poking out from the lining. Adrian frowned. He pulled gently, and the seam tore further. An envelope slid out. Thick, expensive paper, sealed with red wax that had cracked with time. Adrian's hands started to shake. The envelope was addressed in elegant script, for Adrian Volkner, but it had been opened. The seal was broken, and the postmark was from 15 years ago. His breath caught. He opened it fully. Inside were letters, at least a dozen, all addressed to him, all opened. The first one was dated June 2008. My dearest Adrian, I do not know if you will ever read this, but I must try. I am your grandmother, Amélie Delacroix. I have been searching for you for 3 years. Your father and I have not spoken in a long time, but I have never stopped thinking about you. I have written to him many times, begging him to let me meet you, to let me be part of your life. Please know that you are not alone. You have family. You have a future. I can give you everything your father cannot. Education, opportunity, a home that will never be taken from you. Contact me, please. With all my love. Amélie. Adrian's vision blurred. He read the letter again. Then again. Your grandmother. He had a grandmother? He tore through the rest of the letters, each one more desperate than the last. She had sent money, plane tickets, legal documents. She had begged Elias to let her see Adrian. She had offered to take care of everything, and Elias had hidden every single letter. Adrian's hands were shaking so badly now he could barely hold the papers. There was one more item at the bottom of the envelope, a small USB drive. He stared at it. Across the waiting room, a family sat together, crying softly. A man paced near the vending machines. Life and death, happening all around him. But all Adrian could feel was the weight of this tiny drive in his palm. He walked to the nurse's station. Is there a computer I can use? The nurse looked up. There's one in the family lounge, down the hall. Adrian found it. An old desktop in a quiet room with flickering fluorescent lights. He plugged in the drive. One file appeared. For Adrian.mp4. He clicked it. The screen flickered. Then a woman's face appeared. She was elderly, regal, seated in front of a mahogany desk. Her eyes were the same color as Adrian's. My dear Adrian, she began, her voice soft but firm. If you are watching this, then I am gone, and your father has finally failed to keep you from the truth. Adrian's breath stopped. My name is Amélie Delacroix, and you are my grandson, the only family I have left who deserves that name. She paused, her gaze steady on the camera. Your father has stolen your life, but I have made sure he cannot steal your future. Adrian watched the video 3 times before he could process what he was hearing. Each time, Amélie's words hit harder. Your father has stolen your life. He sat in that dim family lounge, the computer screen casting a pale glow on his face, and felt something inside him crack open, not with sadness, but with rage. Pure, white-hot rage. All those years, all those nights he'd gone to bed hungry because there wasn't enough money for food. All those times he'd been humiliated at school, wearing donated clothes, avoiding eye contact in the hallways. All those moments when his father looked him in the eye and said, "No one cares about you." It was a lie. Someone had cared. Someone had searched for him. Someone had tried to save him, and his father had made sure he'd never know. Adrian ejected the USB drive and shoved it into his pocket. He grabbed the stack of letters and walked back toward the ICU, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Elias was still unconscious. Machines beeped steadily. A nurse glanced up as Adrian entered, but said nothing. Adrian stood at the foot of the bed, staring at the man who'd raised him. You son of a bitch, he whispered. Elias didn't move. Adrian pulled out the letters and began reading them again, this time more carefully. The first few were introductory. Amélie explaining who she was, asking Elias to let her meet Adrian, offering financial support. But as the years went on, the tone shifted. By 2012, she was threatening legal action. Elias, I have been patient. I have been generous. I have sent you money every month for 4 years, hoping you would do the right thing. But you continue to keep my grandson from me. If you do not respond to this letter, I will have no choice but to pursue legal custody. I have the resources. I have the proof of your negligence. Do not test me. Amélie. Adrian's stomach turned. His father had been paid to keep him hidden. All those years of poverty, of instability, of moving from place to place, and Elias had been receiving money the entire time. He kept reading. The letters stopped in 2016. The last one was brief. Adrian, I do not know if you will ever read this. Your father has made it clear that he will not allow us to meet, but I will not give up. I have left instructions with my lawyers. When I pass, you will inherit everything, not your father. You. There is a safe deposit box in Geneva, Switzerland. Inside, you will find documents that prove who you are and what is rightfully yours. The access code is your birth date, 04/17/1997. I pray that one day you will find this. And when you do, know that I loved you from the moment you were born. Your grandmother, Amélie Delacroix. Adrian stared at the letter. A safe deposit box. In Geneva. He pulled out his phone and searched. Amélie Delacroix. The results flooded in. She hadn't just been wealthy. She'd been one of the richest women in Europe. Articles about her philanthropic work. Photos of her at galas, standing beside politicians and royalty. News of her death 3 years ago in 2022. And every obituary mentioned the same thing. Delacroix left behind no immediate family. The fate of her estate remains unclear. Adrian's heart pounded. No immediate family. Because they thought he didn't exist. He kept searching. The Delacroix empire was massive. Luxury hotels across Europe, vineyards in France, jewelry stores in Paris, Milan and London. Estimated value, over 3 billion euros. And according to his grandmother's letter, it was his. Adrian's phone buzzed. A text from his boss at the gas station. Where are you? Your shift started an hour ago. He stared at the message. Then he turned off his phone. He wasn't going back to that gas station. He wasn't going back to that apartment. He wasn't going back to any of it. Adrian left the hospital without speaking to anyone. He drove back to the apartment, grabbed his passport, he'd gotten one years ago, dreaming of a life he thought he'd never have, and booked the first flight to Geneva he could find. It left in 6 hours. He packed a single bag. As he zipped it closed, his phone buzzed again. The hospital. He answered. Mr. Volner, your father is awake. He's asking for you. Adrian closed his eyes. Tell him I'll be back. He lied. He hung up. The flight to Geneva was the longest 9 hours of Adrian's life. He couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. He just sat there, the letters clutched in his lap, replaying everything in his mind. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment his father had looked him in the eye and told him they had nothing. When the plane finally landed, Adrian felt like he was stepping into another world. Geneva was beautiful, clean, wealthy, everything his life had never been. He took a cab to the bank listed in his grandmother's letter, a sleek modern building in the heart of the financial district. Inside, a woman in a pristine suit greeted him. How may I help you? Adrian handed her the letter. I need to access a safe deposit box. She read the letter, her expression shifting. One moment, she disappeared into a back office. 10 minutes later, she returned with an older man, the bank manager. Mr. Faulkner, he said carefully, we've been waiting for you. The bank manager led Adrian through a series of corridors, each more secure than the last. Keycard access, biometric scanners, a vault door that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. Your grandmother left very specific instructions, the manager said as they walked. This box was to remain sealed until you came to claim it personally. No exceptions. Adrian's heart hammered in his chest. How long have you been waiting? 3 years since her death. The manager glanced at him. We tried to locate you, but he trailed off delicately. But my father made sure you couldn't. Adrian finished. The manager said nothing. They reached a private viewing room, a small elegant space with a single table and chair. The manager placed a metal box on the table. The code, he said simply. Adrian stepped forward. His hands were shaking again. He entered his birth date, 04/17/1997. The lock clicked. The manager nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind him. Adrian was alone. He lifted the lid. Inside were stacks of documents, all neatly organized. Legal papers, property deeds, stock certificates. But on top of everything was a leather journal with a note attached. Read this first. Adrian opened the journal. It was his grandmother's handwriting. Page after page of entries, spanning decades. The first entry was dated 1995. My son Elias has always been troubled. Even as a child he was consumed by jealousy. When his father died and left the estate to me, Elias couldn't accept it. He demanded his inheritance immediately. When I refused, knowing he would squander it, he cut off all contact. I thought I'd lost him forever. Adrian's throat tightened, but then I heard he'd had a son, Adrian. I hired investigators. It took 2 years to find them. By then Elias was living in poverty, dragging my grandson from city to city. I sent letters, money. I begged him to let me help. He took the money, but he never let me see Adrian. The entries continued, year after year. Amélie describing her attempts to reach Adrian, her frustration with Elias, her fear that she would die before ever meeting her grandson. The final entry was dated 1 week before her death. I am dying. The doctors say I have weeks, perhaps days. I will never meet Adrian in this life. That is the deepest regret of my heart, but I will not let Elias win. I have rewritten my will. Every asset, every holding, every piece of the Delacroix empire will go to Adrian. Elias will receive nothing. Let him live with the knowledge that he destroyed his own future out of spite, and let Adrian know that he was loved. Always. Adrian closed the journal, tears streaming down his face. He'd never cried like this, not once in his entire life. But now, sitting in this sterile room in a foreign country, holding the words of a woman he'd never met, he couldn't stop. She had loved him. Someone had loved him. He wiped his face and turned to the documents. The first was a will, signed and notarized by an international law firm. It was devastatingly clear. I, Amélie Delacroix, being of sound mind, hereby bequeath my entire estate to my grandson, Adrian Volkner. This includes all properties, businesses, financial assets, and holdings under the Delacroix name. My son, Elias Volkner, is explicitly excluded from this inheritance due to his willful alienation of my grandson and his decades of deceit. Adrian stared at the words, entire estate. He kept reading. There were property deeds for hotels in Paris, Geneva, and Vienna. Stock portfolios worth hundreds of millions. Ownership documents for vineyards, jewelry companies, even a private island off the coast of Greece. And at the very bottom, a sealed envelope marked, "Open only if Elias contests the will." Adrian tore it open. Inside was a report from a private investigator, dated 2015. It detailed everything. Elias had been receiving monthly payments from Amélie, payments that were supposed to be used for Adrian's care. But instead, Elias had been pocketing the money, spending it on gambling debts and deliberately keeping Adrian in poverty to maintain the illusion that they had nothing. There were bank statements, photos of Elias at casinos, receipts for expensive purchases he'd made, while Adrian wore second-hand clothes and worked night shifts. The report concluded with a single devastating line. Subject has systematically defrauded Amélie Delacroix for over a decade while emotionally abusing her grandson. Adrian felt sick. He gathered all the documents and walked back into the corridor. The bank manager was waiting. "Did you find what you needed?" Adrian looked at him. "I need to speak with the law firm that handled my grandmother's estate." "Of course, I'll arrange a meeting." 2 hours later, Adrian sat in a glass-walled conference room overlooking Lake Geneva. Across from him were 3 lawyers from one of the most prestigious firms in Europe. The lead attorney, a woman named Dr. Isabelle Fournier, reviewed the documents Adrian had brought. "This is all legitimate," she said finally. "You are the sole heir to the Delacroix estate." "My father doesn't know yet," Adrian said. Dr. Fournier's expression hardened. "Would you like us to inform him?" Adrian thought about it. His father lying in that hospital bed, thinking he'd gotten away with it, thinking Adrian would never find out. "No," Adrian said quietly. "I'll tell him myself." Dr. Fournier nodded. "We'll begin the formal transfer process immediately. But Mr. Volkner, you should know that your father may attempt to contest this will." "Let him try," Adrian said. He stood up. "I want to see everything, every property, every business. I want to know exactly what my grandmother built." "Of course." Adrian walked to the window, looking out over the city. Somewhere across the Atlantic, his father was waking up, probably wondering where his son had gone. Soon, he would know, and it would destroy him. The tour began the next morning. Dr. Fournier and her team had arranged everything: a private car, a bilingual assistant, access to every property and business under the Delacroix name. "We'll start with the flagship hotel," Dr. Fournier said, as they drove through the streets of Geneva. "The Grand Delacroix. Your grandmother purchased it in 1982 and transformed it into one of the most exclusive hotels in Europe." They pulled up in front of a stunning Belle Époque building, all cream-colored stone and gilded balconies. A doorman, in an impeccable uniform, opened the car door. "Mr. Volkner," he said with a slight bow. Adrian stepped out, feeling absurdly out of place. He was still wearing the same jeans and jacket he'd traveled in. Meanwhile, everyone around him looked like they'd walked off a fashion runway. Inside, the hotel was breathtaking. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art that probably cost more than Adrian had earned in his entire life. The general manager, a poised woman named Margot, greeted them in the lobby. "Mr. Volkner, it's an honor. Your grandmother spoke of you often." Adrian's chest tightened. "She did? Always. She hoped that one day you would see everything she built." Margot led them through the hotel, the spa, the Michelin-starred restaurant, the rooftop terrace with views of the Alps. "We host heads of state, celebrities, royalty," Margot explained. "Your grandmother insisted on absolute discretion and impeccable service. That reputation is why we remain fully booked year-round." Adrian nodded, barely able to process it all. This was his. From Geneva, they flew to Paris. The Delacroix jewelry atelier was located on the Rue de la Paix, nestled between Cartier and Van Cleef and Arpels. The master jeweler, an elderly man named Philippe, showed Adrian pieces that belonged in museums. "Your grandmother had an eye for beauty," Philippe said, holding up a necklace that glittered like captured starlight. Every design she commissioned told a story. Adrian stared at the necklace. "How much is this worth?" €2 million, conservatively. Adrian set it down carefully. They visited the vineyard next, a sprawling estate in Bordeaux that produced some of the most sought-after wines in the world. The vintner, a man named Jean-Luc, walked Adrian through rows of grapevines that seemed to stretch forever. "Your grandmother loved this place," Jean-Luc said. "She would come here every autumn for the harvest. She said it reminded her of what was real." Adrian ran his hand along the vines. For the first time in days, he felt something other than anger. He felt grief. His grandmother had built all of this. She'd poured her life into it, and she'd wanted to share it with him, but his father had stolen that chance. By the time they returned to Geneva, Adrian had seen it all. The hotels, the jewelry ateliers, the vineyards, the private properties scattered across Europe. Dr. Fournier presented him with a comprehensive portfolio detailing every asset. "The total value of the estate," she said, "is approximately €3.2 billion. Adrian stared at the number. 3.2 billion. He'd grown up thinking they didn't have enough money for food. "There's one more thing," Dr. Fournier said. She slid another document across the table. "This is a forensic accounting report we commissioned after your grandmother's death." Adrian picked it up. "What is it?" "Proof that your father embezzled funds from your grandmother for over 15 years. Adrian's blood went cold. The report detailed everything. Monthly payments Amélie had sent, intended for Adrian's care, that Elias had diverted into his own accounts. Cash withdrawals, wire transfers, gambling expenses. In total, Elias had stolen nearly $2 million. "This is a criminal offense," Dr. Fournier said. "If you wish to pursue charges—" "I do," Adrian said immediately. Dr. Fournier nodded. "We'll work with international authorities. But you should know, this will be public. The media will cover it extensively." "Good," Adrian said. "I want everyone to know what he did." That night, Adrian sat alone in his hotel suite overlooking Lake Geneva. He'd been gone for 3 days. His phone was full of messages from the hospital, from his old boss, even from a few former co-workers asking where he'd disappeared to. But there was nothing from his father. Elias hadn't tried to reach him once. Adrian pulled out the USB drive his grandmother had left and plugged it into his laptop. He watched the video again. Amélie's face filled the screen. "My dear Adrian," she said, "if you are watching this, then I am gone, and your father has finally failed to keep you from the truth." Adrian paused the video. He stared at her face, the face he'd only seen once before, in that photograph his father had hidden. She had his eyes, or maybe he had hers. "I'm sorry I never met you," Adrian whispered to the screen. But even as he said it, he felt something else. Determination. His grandmother had fought for him. She'd spent years trying to break through Elias's walls, trying to reach him. Now it was his turn to fight, not just for the inheritance, but for the truth. He closed the laptop, pulled out his phone, and booked a flight back to the States. It was time to face his father. Adrian landed in Erie at 11 at night. He didn't go home. He went straight to the hospital. The ICU was quiet, just the rhythmic beeping of machines and the soft footsteps of night shift nurses. Elias was awake. He turned his head when Adrian walked in, his expression shifting from relief to something else, something guarded. "Where the hell have you been?" Elias rasped, his voice hoarse. "I've been trying to reach you for 3 days." Adrian didn't answer. He pulled a chair up to the bed and sat down. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You look different," Elias said finally. "I am different," Adrian replied. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the stack of letters. Elias's face went white. "Where did you get those?" "From your coat." Adrian's voice was calm, eerily so. "It tore when they brought you in, and these fell out." Elias opened his mouth, then closed it. "I went to Geneva," Adrian continued. "I met with my grandmother's lawyers. I opened the safe deposit box she left for me." "Adrian, I know everything." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Elias tried to sit up, but winced, his hand going to his chest. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Adrian leaned forward. "My grandmother tried to find me for 15 years. She sent letters, money, plane tickets. She begged you to let her meet me, and you hid every single one." "She was trying to take you from me." Elias's voice cracked. "She wanted to steal you, turn you against me. She wanted to save me." Adrian's shout echoed through the room. A nurse glanced in but didn't interrupt. Adrian took a breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "You let me grow up thinking I had nothing, that I was nothing. You let me believe no one in the world cared whether I lived or died. That's not... And the whole time, you were cashing her checks." Elias froze. Adrian pulled out the forensic report and dropped it on the bed. $2 million, that's how much you stole from her. Money that was supposed to be for me, for my education, my future. Elias stared at the document, his face ashen. "Where did it go, Dad? The casinos, the debts you never told me about? You don't know what it was like? Then tell me." Adrian's voice was ice. "Tell me why you destroyed my life." Elias looked away, his jaw working. For a long time he said nothing. Then, finally, "She abandoned me." Adrian blinked. "What?" "My mother." Elias's voice was bitter, broken. "When my father died, he left everything to her, not me, his only son, and she kept it all. Said I wasn't ready. I said I needed to prove myself." He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "I was 40 years old and she treated me like a child. So you punished me for it," Adrian said quietly. "I gave you a life," Elias snapped. "I raised you. I could have left you in foster care, but I didn't. I kept you. You kept me in poverty while you spent my inheritance." Elias flinched. "You could have given me a chance," Adrian said. "You could have let her help us. But you were so consumed by your own bitterness that you'd rather watch me suffer than admit you were wrong." "She didn't care about you," Elias spat. "She just wanted to hurt me. You were a tool to her, nothing more." Adrian stood up. "I met the people who worked for her, the hotel managers, the jewelers, the staff who'd known her for decades, and you know what they all said." Elias said nothing. "They said she talked about me constantly. She kept a photo of me on her desk, the only one she had from when I was a baby. She hoped every single day that I'd find my way to her." Adrian's voice broke. "She loved me, and you stole that." Elias looked at him, and for the first time Adrian saw something other than anger in his father's eyes. He saw fear. "What are you going to do?" Elias whispered. Adrian placed a business card on the bed. "The law firm in Geneva. They'll be contacting you. My grandmother left a will. I inherit everything, you get nothing." Elias's breath hitched. "And the money you stole, I'm pressing charges, embezzlement, fraud, all of it." "You can't." "I can." Adrian turned toward the door. "And I am." "Adrian, please." Adrian stopped, but didn't turn around. "I'm your father." "No," Adrian said quietly. "You're the man who raised me in a cage and pretended it was love." He walked out. Behind him, he heard his father calling his name, the sound growing fainter as Adrian moved down the hallway. He didn't look back. Outside the hospital, Adrian sat in his car for a long time, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He'd thought confronting his father would bring him some kind of closure, but all he felt was empty. His phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Fournier. "The press has picked up the story. You'll need to prepare for media attention." Adrian stared at the message. Then he started the car and drove toward the future. The story broke 48 hours later. Delacroix heir found after decades. Father accused of hiding billionaire grandmother. It was everywhere. Cable news, social media, international papers. Adrian's face, A photo the press had pulled from an old employee badge was plastered across headlines around the world. By the third day, camera crews were camped outside the hospital, outside Adrian's apartment, outside the law firm in Geneva. Dr. Fournier had warned him, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer scale of it. "You need a publicist," she said over a video call, "and security. The media won't leave you alone until this dies down." "I don't want it to die down," Adrian said. Dr. Fournier raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, I want people to know what he did, not just the legal facts, the whole story." She studied him. "That's a dangerous game, Mr. Volkner. Once you go public, there's no taking it back." "I'm not trying to take it back." Adrian agreed to one interview. 60 minutes, prime time. A journalist named Diane Cooper who'd covered high-profile inheritance cases before. They filmed in Geneva, in the study of the Grand Delacroix Hotel. Diane sat across from Adrian, her expression professional but kind. "Adrian, you grew up in poverty. You didn't even know you had a grandmother until a few weeks ago. How does that feel?" Adrian took a breath. "It feels like my entire life was a lie. Your father has released a statement saying he was protecting you, that your grandmother was manipulative and would have used you against him. How do you respond to that?" Adrian met the camera directly. "My father cashed checks from my grandmother for 15 years, checks that were supposed to be for my education, my health, my future. He spent that money on himself while I worked night shifts at a gas station and wore second-hand clothes." He pulled out one of the letters. "This is from 2010. My grandmother offered to pay for my college tuition. My father never told me. I never went to college because we couldn't afford it." Diane's expression softened. "That must be incredibly painful." "It's not just painful. It's theft. He stole my childhood, my opportunities, my relationship with the one person who actually wanted me. He's still your father." "No," Adrian's voice was firm. "A father protects his child. A father wants what's best for them. He wanted control. And when he couldn't control me anymore, he tried to erase me." The interview aired on a Sunday night. 20 million people watched. By Monday morning, Elias Volkner was the most hated man in America. Social media exploded. "How do you steal from your own child? This man deserves prison. Adrian Volkner is a hero for speaking out." But not everyone was on Adrian's side. Some outlets ran counter-narratives. Ungrateful son abandons dying father for billions. Delacroix heir or gold digger. It didn't matter. The forensic evidence was too strong. The letters too damning. Within a week, the district attorney opened a criminal investigation. Elias tried to fight back. He hired a lawyer, a slick, expensive defense attorney, who held a press conference outside the hospital. "My client is a sick man being vilified by a media circus," the lawyer said. Elias Volkner made difficult choices as a single parent raising a child alone. He did what he thought was best. A reporter shouted from the crowd, "He cashed $2 million in checks meant for his son." That money was used to care for Adrian, housing, food, medical expenses. "Then where are the receipts?" another reporter interrupted. The lawyer faltered. "Because there were no receipts." Elias had spent the money on himself, and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, Adrian was drowning in legal paperwork. The estate transfer was moving forward, but slowly. There were properties to be appraised, businesses to be audited, international regulations to navigate. Dr. Fournier and her team worked around the clock, but even with their expertise, it would take months to finalize everything. In the meantime, Adrian stayed in Geneva, learning how to run an empire he'd never imagined owning. The hotel managers taught him the hospitality business. The jewelers showed him how to evaluate diamonds and gemstones. The vintners walked him through the winemaking process, from grape to bottle. It was overwhelming, but for the first time in his life, Adrian felt like he was building something instead of just surviving. Then came the court hearing. Elias's lawyer filed an emergency motion to freeze the estate, arguing that Amélie Delacroix had been coerced or manipulated in her final years. The hearing was held in a Swiss court, but it was broadcast live due to the intense public interest. Adrian sat in the front row, flanked by Dr. Fournier and her team. Across the aisle, Elias was wheeled in on a hospital gurney, his lawyer beside him. Their eyes met. Elias looked smaller than Adrian remembered, grayer, broken, but Adrian felt no sympathy. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Elias's lawyer presented his case, that Amélie had been elderly and vulnerable, that she'd been influenced by vindictive advisors who poisoned her against her own son. Dr. Fournier dismantled the argument methodically. She presented the letters, the financial records, the testimonies of Amélie's staff, all of whom confirmed that she had been sharp and lucid until the very end. And then came the final piece of evidence, the video will. Dr. Fournier played it for the court. Amélie's face filled the screen. I, Amélie Delacroix, being of sound mind, leave my entire estate to my grandson, Adrian Volkner. My son, Elias, has forfeited any claim through his actions. Her voice was calm, clear, unshakable. He stole my grandson's childhood. He will not steal his future. The courtroom was silent. The judge reviewed the documents. Then he spoke. The will is valid. The estate transfers to Adrian Volkner in full. Motion denied. The gavel struck. It was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Adrian, how do you feel? What's next for the Delacroix empire? Do you have any message for your father? Adrian stopped at the microphone. I have nothing to say to my father, but I have everything to say to people who've been silenced, erased, or told they don't matter. He looked directly into the camera. You do matter, and the people who tried to keep you small will not win. He walked away as the cameras flashed behind him. Elias Volkner's life unraveled quickly. The criminal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, the district attorney filed formal charges: embezzlement, fraud, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable person. The evidence was airtight. Elias's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA refused. The case was too high profile, the public outrage too intense. The trial date was set for 3 months out. In the meantime, Elias was released from the hospital and placed under house arrest, wearing an ankle monitor and prohibited from leaving the county. He tried to stay out of the public eye, but it was impossible. Neighbors sold stories to tabloids. Former co-workers gave interviews. Even people Adrian barely remembered, teachers from his childhood, landlords from the apartments they'd fled, came forward with their own accounts of Elias's erratic behavior. The picture they painted was damning. A man consumed by bitterness who drank too much, gambled recklessly, and blamed everyone else for his failures. Adrian watched it all from Geneva. Part of him felt vindicated, but another part, the part that remembered being 7 years old, standing on that sidewalk in Gary, Indiana, felt something else. Not sympathy, but sadness. One night, Adrian's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Adrian. It was his father's voice. Adrian's jaw tightened. How did you get this number? Please, just listen. I have nothing to say to you. I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to understand. Understand what? Adrian's voice was cold. That you're sorry? That you didn't mean to ruin my life? I didn't ruin your life. I gave you a life. I kept you safe. Safe? Adrian laughed bitterly. You kept me isolated, afraid. You made me believe I was worthless. I protected you from her. Elias's voice cracked. She would have taken you away from me, turned you into one of them. One of what? Someone with opportunities? Someone who didn't have to work 60-hour weeks just to survive? Silence. Then Elias spoke again. Quieter now. I couldn't lose you too. Adrian frowned. What? Everyone left me. My father died and left everything to her. My wife, your mother, walked out when you were 6 months old. I had nothing. And then my mother tried to take you too. She wasn't trying to take me. She was trying to help me. She was trying to prove I was a failure, Elias shouted. Don't you see? If I let her in, if I let her save you, then everyone would know I couldn't do it myself, that I wasn't good enough. Adrian closed his eyes. For a moment he almost understood. Almost. So you chose your pride over my future, Adrian said quietly. I chose us. I chose keeping my son. You chose control. Adrian's voice hardened. And now you've lost everything. I've lost you. The words hung in the air. Adrian wanted to feel something. Anger, pity, anything. But all he felt was tired. Goodbye, Dad. Adrian, wait. Adrian hung up. He sat there for a long time, staring at his phone. Then he blocked the number. The trial began in early October. Adrian flew back to the States for it, though Dr. Fournier advised against it. You don't need to be there, she said. The evidence speaks for itself. I need to see it through, Adrian replied. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the gallery. Sketch artists worked furiously. Elias sat at the defense table, gaunt and hollow-eyed. Adrian sat in the front row of the prosecution side. Their eyes met once, briefly, before Elias looked away. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented the forensic accounting report, showing exactly how much Elias had stolen, and where the money had gone. Casinos, online poker sites, high-interest loans. They called witnesses, bank employees who'd processed the wire transfers, investigators who'd tracked Elias's spending, even a former landlord who testified that Elias had been evicted multiple times for gambling debts. Elias's lawyer tried to argue that the money had been used for Adrian's care, but the numbers didn't lie. Less than 10% had gone toward legitimate expenses. The rest had disappeared into Elias's addictions. When it was time for the defense, Elias took the stand. His lawyer guided him through a rehearsed narrative that he'd been a struggling single father doing his best, that his mother had been manipulative and controlling, that he'd made mistakes but had always loved his son. Then came cross-examination. The prosecutor was a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Angela Reyes. "Mr. Faulkner," she began, "you testified that you used the money from your mother to care for your son, is that correct?" "Yes." "Can you explain, then, why your son wore donated clothes while you spent $5,000 at a casino in Atlantic City?" Elias faltered. That was a mistake. A mistake you repeated 47 times over 10 years. The courtroom was silent. "Your Honor," Elias's lawyer interjected, "my client has acknowledged that he struggled with gambling." "Struggled?" Reyes turned to the jury. "Mr. Faulkner didn't struggle. He chose. Every single time he walked into a casino or logged into a poker site, he chose his addiction over his son's future." She pulled out a document. "This is a letter from your mother, dated March 2012. She writes, and I quote, 'The money I send is for Adrian's education. If you continue to misuse it, I will take legal action.'" She looked at Elias. "Did you stop?" "I tried." "Did you stop?" Elias's shoulders slumped. "No. No further questions." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Elias was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. When the verdict was read, he didn't react. He just sat there, staring at the table. Adrian watched him being led away in handcuffs, and he felt nothing. It was over. 6 months after the trial, Adrian stood in the boardroom of Delacroix International, surrounded by executives 3 times his age. It was his first official meeting as chairman of the board. The transition hadn't been easy. There were shareholders who doubted him, managers who resented his sudden rise, competitors who saw him as inexperienced and vulnerable. But Adrian had spent every day since the trial learning. He studied business management, contract law, hospitality operations. He traveled to every Delacroix property, meeting staff, understanding workflows, identifying inefficiencies. He made mistakes, plenty of them. He approved a marketing campaign that flopped. He hired a CFO who turned out to be incompetent. He nearly signed a disastrous merger deal before Dr. Fournier stopped him. But he learned from every failure, and slowly, people began to take him seriously. "Mr. Chairman," said Michel Cartier, the head of European operations, "we need to discuss the Vienna hotel. Occupancy rates have dropped 12% this quarter." Adrian nodded. "I've reviewed the data. The problem isn't the property, it's the pricing structure. We're competing with boutique hotels that offer similar luxury at lower rates." "So you're suggesting we lower our prices?" Michel's tone was skeptical. "No, I'm suggesting we add value. Exclusive experiences, partnerships with local cultural institutions. Make the Grand Delacroix Vienna not just a place to stay, but a gateway to the city." Michel exchanged glances with the other executives. "That's actually not a bad idea." "Then let's implement it," Adrian said. "I want a proposal by next week." The meeting continued for another hour, covering financials, expansion plans, staffing issues. By the end, Adrian was exhausted, but he was also exhilarated. This was what his grandmother had built, and now it was his to protect. Not everything was boardrooms and strategy meetings. Adrian also made time to visit the properties himself, often unannounced. One afternoon, he showed up at the Paris atelier and spent 3 hours learning to set gemstones under Philippe's patient instruction. "You have good hands," Philippe observed. "Steady." "I used to work in a junkyard," Adrian said, "sorting scrap metal." Philippe smiled. "Then this should be no problem." Another time, Adrian joined the harvest at the Bordeaux vineyard, working alongside the seasonal laborers. Jean-Luc, the vintner, found him at sunset, covered in dirt and sweat. "You don't have to do this, you know," Jean-Luc said. "I know," Adrian replied, "but my grandmother did, and I want to understand what she loved about it." Jean-Luc handed him a bottle of wine. a vintage from the year Adrian was born. She saved this for you. Said she wanted to share it with you when you finally came home. Adrian stared at the bottle, his throat tight. Thank you. That night, he opened the wine alone in his hotel room. It tasted like earth and time and love. Not everyone was happy with Adrian's rise. There were lawsuits, distant relatives claiming they deserved a share of the inheritance, competitors spreading rumors about his instability, tabloids digging into his past, painting him as either a victim or an opportunist depending on the outlet. But Adrian had learned something important. He didn't need everyone to like him. He just needed to do right by the people who depended on him. The hotel staff, the vineyard workers, the jewelers and managers and everyone whose livelihoods were tied to the Delacroix name. They were his responsibility now. One evening, Adrian was working late in his Geneva office when Dr. Fournier knocked on the door. You should see this, she said, handing him a tablet. It was a news article. Delacroix Hotels ranked #1 in customer satisfaction for luxury European brands. Adrian read the article twice. Under his leadership, the company had not only survived the chaos of the inheritance battle, it had thrived. Your grandmother would be proud, Dr. Fournier said quietly. Adrian looked up at her. Do you think she knew that I'd be able to do this? I think she knew exactly who you were. That's why she chose you. Late one night, Adrian received a letter. It was from a prison in Pennsylvania. From Elias. Adrian stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Adrian, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But I need you to know that I see it now. What I did. What I took from you. I told myself I was protecting you. But the truth is I was protecting myself. From the shame of admitting I'd failed. From the pain of watching you surpass me. You deserved better. You deserved the life your grandmother wanted to give you. I can't give you back what I stole, but I can give you this. I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to say that, but it's true. You became everything I couldn't. I'm sorry. Dad Adrian read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer and locked it. He didn't respond, but he didn't throw it away either. A year after taking over the Delacroix empire, Adrian stood on the rooftop of the Grand Delacroix Geneva, looking out over the city lights. He thought about the boy he'd been, scared, poor, convinced he didn't matter, and he thought about the man he'd become, not because of wealth, but because someone had believed in him, someone he'd never met, but someone who'd loved him anyway. He pulled out his phone and opened the video his grandmother had left. He'd watched it dozens of times, but tonight he noticed something new. At the very end, after she'd said everything about the inheritance and the legal battles, there was one final sentence. Adrian, whoever you become, be kind. Be better than we were. That's all I ask. Adrian smiled. I'll try, Grandma. He whispered to the stars. I'll try. Spring came to Europe like a whisper. Adrian had been running the Delacroix empire for 18 months now. The company was profitable. His leadership was solidifying, and the media frenzy had finally died down. But there was still one thing he hadn't done. One place he hadn't been. His grandmother's grave. It wasn't that he'd been avoiding it exactly. He'd been preparing, trying to find the right words, the right moment. But Dr. Fournier had been gentle, but firm. She's waiting for you, Adrian. Don't make her wait forever. So on a cool April morning, Adrian drove to the Delacroix family cemetery, nestled in the hills outside Geneva. It was a small, private plot surrounded by ancient trees and wildflowers. Peaceful, quiet, nothing like the chaos of the life he'd been living. He walked through the iron gates past the weathered headstones of generations of Delacroix family members, and then he saw it, a simple marble monument, elegant but understated. Amélie Delacroix, 1946, 2022. She gave everything so that love would not be forgotten. Adrian stood before the grave, his hands in his pockets. For a long time, he said nothing. What do you say to someone who changed your life, but you never got to meet? Hi, Grandma, he finally said, his voice quiet. I'm sorry it took me so long. The wind rustled through the trees. I don't even know where to start. There's so much I want to tell you. He sat down on the grass, leaning against the headstone. I know about the hotels now, the vineyards, the jewelry ateliers. It's overwhelming, but I'm learning. I'm trying to do right by everything you built. He paused. Philippe told me you used to visit the Paris atelier every month, that you'd spend hours just watching the jewelers work. I did that last week. I get it now. There's something meditative about it, creating something beautiful from raw materials. Adrian smiled. Jean-Luc told me you loved the harvest season. that you'd work alongside the staff even though you didn't have to. I did that too. My back hurt for a week, but it was worth it. His smile faded. I met your staff, all of them, and they all said the same thing, that you talked about me constantly, that you kept my baby photo on your desk, that you never stopped hoping. His voice cracked. I wish I'd known. I wish I'd had the chance to meet you, to thank you, to tell you that you weren't alone in caring. He wiped his eyes. My father is in prison. I don't know if you can see that from wherever you are. Part of me thinks you'd be angry with him, but another part thinks you'd be sad, because at the end of the day, he was still your son. Adrian took a deep breath. I don't know if I'll ever forgive him. Maybe I will someday. But right now, I'm just trying to move forward. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an object wrapped in cloth. It was small, worn, unremarkable. He unwrapped it carefully. A toy car, rusted, one wheel missing. This was mine, Adrian said. From when I was a kid. It's the only thing I kept from my childhood. I used to carry it everywhere. He turned it over in his hands. It was the only thing that felt like it belonged to me, not to my father, not to the landlords or the cities we ran from, just mine. He placed it gently at the base of the headstone. But I don't need it anymore, because I'm not that kid anymore. I'm not defined by what I didn't have. He stood up, brushing the grass from his pants. Thank you, Grandma, for everything, for believing in me when I didn't even know you existed, for fighting for me, for making sure I'd have a chance. He took one last look at the grave. I promise I won't waste it. As Adrian walked back through the cemetery, he felt something shift inside him. Not closure, exactly, but peace. He'd spent so much of his life feeling like he didn't belong anywhere, like he was always running, always hiding, always one step away from disaster. But standing in that cemetery, surrounded by his family's history, he realized something. He wasn't running anymore. He was home. That evening, Adrian returned to his office in Geneva. Waiting on his desk was a letter. It had been delivered by courier, expensive stationery, sealed with wax. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. Adrian, you don't know me, but I knew your grandmother well. My name is Catherine Laurent, and I was her closest friend for 40 years. Amélie spoke of you often, always with such hope. She believed, even in her final days, that you would find your way to her. I am writing to tell you that she left something for you, something she wanted you to have when you were ready. It is a letter, her final letter to you. I have kept it safe, as she instructed. If you wish to receive it, please contact me. With warm regards, Catherine Laurent. Adrian stared at the note, a final letter. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. He typed a response. I'm ready. 3 days later, Adrian met Catherine at a small cafe overlooking Lake Geneva. She was an elegant woman in her 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes. You look just like her, Catherine said, smiling. Your eyes, your determination. She handed him an envelope, old, carefully preserved. She wrote this the day before she died. She made me promise to give it to you when the time was right. Adrian took the envelope with trembling hands. Thank you. Catherine squeezed his hand. She was so proud of you, Adrian, even though she never met you. After she left, Adrian sat alone at the cafe. He opened the envelope. Inside, in his grandmother's elegant handwriting, were the words that would stay with him forever. My dearest Adrian, if you are reading this, then you have found your way home. I do not know what kind of man you have become, but I know this. You are stronger than the circumstances that tried to break you. You are kinder than the cruelty you have endured. You are worthy of every opportunity you were denied. The empire I leave to you is not just hotels and vineyards and jewels. It is a legacy of resilience, of believing that love and hope can outlast even the deepest betrayals. Your father stole your childhood, but he could not steal your future. That belongs to you alone. Build a life that is yours, not mine, not his, yours. And when you feel lost, remember this. You were loved before you were found. You were wanted before you knew. And you were always, always enough. Go forward, my darling boy, and be free. With all my love, your grandmother. Amélie. Adrien read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket, over his heart. He stood up, looked out over the lake, and smiled. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. 5 years later, Adrian Volkner stood at the entrance of the newest Delacroix property, a luxury resort built on his grandmother's private island off the coast of Greece. It had taken 3 years to complete. Every detail had been carefully planned, from the architecture to the landscaping to the staff training programs. But this wasn't just a hotel. It was a scholarship center. Every year, the Amélie Delacroix Foundation would bring 50 young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to the island. They would receive training in hospitality, business, and leadership, completely free. It was Adrian's way of ensuring that what had been stolen from him would never be stolen from someone else. As the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, Adrian looked out at the crowd: staff members, scholarship recipients, journalists, dignitaries, and in the front row, Catherine Laurent, his grandmother's oldest friend, smiling through tears. Adrian took the microphone. "My grandmother once told me, through a letter I found after she was gone, that I was loved before I was found, that I was wanted before I knew." His voice was steady, strong. "For most of my life, I believed I was nobody, that I came from nothing, that I had no future." He paused. "But the truth is I came from love, from a woman who fought for me even when I didn't know she existed." He looked directly at the camera. "This place is for everyone who's been told they don't matter, who's been hidden, silenced, denied." His eyes shone. "You matter, you are seen, and your future starts now." The crowd erupted in applause. Adrian stepped back from the podium and looked up at the sky. "Thank you, Grandma," he whispered. And somewhere in the space between memory and hope, he felt her answer. "You're welcome, my darling boy. Now go and be extraordinary." He raised me in the silence of poverty. She found me in the silence of truth, and I chose to repeat neither.